You have been lied to about food prices. That is what Johnny Harris says in his new video. And I think this video is about the increasing food prices in the United States of America. And I think globally we're seeing an inflation for the last couple of years, especially during and after the pandemic. So I'm very curious what he has to say. I love the channel. He's usually very well informed about this topic that concern a lot of us. And if you're new here, my name is Phil. I'm from Germany and I like to learn about all things America. So let's get right into it. You've been lied to about food prices.
Eggs, milk, bread, ground beef, butter. Prices at the grocery store are going up, especially for people who spend a large amount of their income on food. So a little price shock can have huge effects. Grocery prices that usually go up 1 or 2% a year have started jumping to more like 13% a year.
Prices are going up yet again.
Sticker shock on store shelves.
You probably don't need to be reminded.
Now, of course, everyone's blaming COVID and broader inflation. And while those are a part of the explanation, there's actually something bigger going on here.
All right.
Check this out. Food companies are bringing in record profits. CEOs of those companies are making way more just in the last few years, and shareholders are getting huge payouts. So
my theory is we're all blaming COVID, and a lot of the increased inflation was accelerated by COVID. But I also see, just think of it as a big corporation. That is such a easy excuse to jump on as a company and just higher the prices more than you need to just make a bigger profit.
What is going on here? That is a question I have had for a long time, and we're sitting here in the kitchen. Today we're going to understand our food system, the vast, complicated, kind of magical food system that provides a lot of us with our nourishment, bringing food from all around the world to our grocery store shelves. And then we're going to look at the corporations behind this system. I want to understand what their incentives are, what their power is, and what they have to do, if anything, with the rising prices. I also want to understand why they're making so much money right now. And ultimately, I want to answer what and who is behind this massive increase in grocery store prices. About 8,000 years ago,
6,000
in what today is Syria and Iraq, you could find humans doing something that was pretty unique for the time. They're growing food, and in fact more food than they actually needed, and then started trading it with other people who had more than they needed. Now this was new. If there was one group who lived near a salt mine and another group who grew wheat, they would both make a surplus, they would swap their goods, and both would be better off. A super basic idea that changed everything. Humans started doing this at a more and more massive scale, crossing seas and deserts, building empires to move goods, to share tools, to spread ideas. And the collective human focus became, how do we do this better, bigger?
That's true. And I think we got so far away from growing our own food that it is almost becoming a first world hobby nowadays, because I'm also already thinking about, hey, wouldn't it be nice to just grow some potatoes in your own garden and just eat out of your garden? At least you know where it comes from, what goes in it.
Invented technology to improve it. We fought wars over it. We created money and companies and laws, entire systems just to trade more stuff with more people. Trade was changing the world. And a lot of the history of our world is the history of trade. It's what spread ideas and technology and flavors around the globe. Arabic math and Chinese inventions, tomatoes arriving to Italy, chilies arriving to Asia, corn to Africa. Coffee arrives to Europe in like the 1500s and blows everyone's minds. Contributes to a whole revolution in thinking.
And now look at us drinking 12 cups a day in the office.
Good coffee, guys. But despite all of this global trade and improvement and connecting the world and bringing flavors everywhere, food still remained quite expensive. You still had to work really hard just to feed yourself and your family. Like, we have data from the late 1700s that shows that people in Britain spent 75% of their income just feeding themselves.
Wow, 75% in the late 1700s to feed themselves. Let me guess what it is today. I don't even know. I would say 10% or something like that. 10, 15% maybe?
Around the same time in France, they were spending about 70% of their income on bread alone.
Just on bread?
Oh my god. Is there anything better than just white bread? Okay, but soon that started changing and fast. Let's graph it. Look what happens by the year 1900. A household is spending more like 42% of their income on food. Then in the 30s, it goes down to 34%. Just keeps falling. After World War II, something really dramatic changes in the global economy. The US and its allies built a global economic system meant to connect the globe. Maybe if everyone's economy was connected, it would all be benefiting too much to fight each other, was kind of the thinking.
And America wanted to set the rules for everyone, and
they successfully did. And with this new system comes a whole new level of efficiency and connection. Like these magical boxes that can go seamlessly from ships to trains to trucks, drastically cutting costs and loading time. The world standardized around everything from railroad sizes, pallet sizes, paper sizes.
Sorry, just another hobby of the first world country. People start to live in these boxes now. Tiny homes, container homes.
Shoe sizes, screw sizes. It's invisible stuff. This isn't sexy, but it's important. It's transformative. The whole idea being that if everyone's using the same system, everything, everywhere becomes more efficient. Trade gets better. Now a tractor part made in South Korea snaps in nicely to a tractor in Kansas. And then there was the US dollar that everyone could use as the global currency, along with international agreements that laid the rules for modern trade. Suddenly, it's like the 1950s and the whole world is being stitched together in ways our ancient grain trading ancestors could have never imagined. And this is why today almost everything you touch has gone to more countries than you have, because it traverses a huge network of the global economy. We call it the supply chain. Like, look at an iPhone, albeit kind of cracked. This iPhone traveled to 43 countries before it ended up in my hands.
What?
Okay, but food isn't an iPhone. Food is squishy and perishable and needs to kind of be refrigerated. It doesn't go through the same, like, advanced global supply chain that other stuff does, right? Wrong, actually. This is a beautiful tomato that was grown here in my local area that I bought at a farmer's market. Anyway, this cost $6. Okay, this is a $6 tomato. Take it in. That's beautiful.
And that might be the problem. Way too expensive. That's a high price for one tomato.
Tomato. Wow, shoots really nicely. 5 miles from my house. Okay.
How much is
then
the
we've
one
got
from
these tomatoes.
Spain?
They don't look that much different.
Southern
a little more
Spain.
uniform. These are tomatoes that came from the global economy. They're all basically the exact same size. These have come to me from very far away, not in this country. We actually do grow a lot of tomatoes here in the United States, over in California, but most of our tomatoes are grown in Mexico. 4 billion pounds a year come into the US. So here we are in northern Mexico, here in these endless, fertile fields. They're often picked while they are still green. They're not ripe yet. Often picked by hand and then loaded into trucks. A tomato like this will often go into a sealed room where they are gassed with ethylene to ripen them. Ethylene is just a naturally occurring hormone that helps ripen these guys. And they want them to all ripen at the same time, right as they get to the grocery store. But we have a long way to go before we get to the grocery store. So they're pumped with this gas. And then if they're going into cans, which a lot of tomatoes do, they go through this industrial factory wizardry. But for the ones that are gonna end up like this, fresh, they are on a truck headed north. They end up in a nearby city, probably the capital, Culiacan, in this big facility where they are sorted, chilled, and then put on big pallets. They get back onto a truck, which, by the way, all of these trucks are refrigerated. And now the truck is heading north. It gets to the US-Mexico border. Look, this is where people go back and forth between the two countries. But over here is a special border crossing just for trucks. Our tomatoes are in one of these. It clears customs, and then it probably ends up at one of these transfer stations where the trailer might be transferred on to another truck, to an American driver who will take it from there. The tomatoes are now in the United States. Once in the US, they might be re-ripened and repackaged. And they eventually take a long-haul trip on America's freeways, ending up at a distribution center like this one in Illinois. Here, tucked into the endless expanse of farmland, is this massive building surrounded by cargo trucks. The tomatoes are unloaded, they're scanned for inventory, they're repackaged, and then they're back on the road, headed towards the grocery store. And I promise I'm getting close here. Okay, we've arrived at the grocery store. This whole journey was 9 days, about 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles.
And in the end, they will still be cheaper, and that is just crazy to think of.
The tomatoes are finally stacked in the vegetable aisle, ready for you to buy a pound for $2. Yeah. Bring them home, chop them up, and throw them into a sauce. Bon appetit. That was crazy, right?
Yes,
like that whole journey, like your tomatoes came all the way from a farm in Mexico, and they...
Just as a reference, I mentioned southern Spain earlier because in Europe we have the same thing. In Germany, so many tomatoes come from southern Spain, the Almeria area. I think it's the biggest tomato producer in Europe. And just to think that they come all the way up from there, it's very similar to this example that he did here with Mexico.
Somehow made it to the grocery store without being smashed or like going bad, and are somehow significantly cheaper than this? How does that work? Like, how does that make any sense? And it's not just tomatoes. Avocados are picked by hand in southern Mexico, sorted, chilled, trucked, and displayed in the northeast of the United States in the dead of winter for like $3. Most of our vegetables in the United States come from other countries, like 60%. And of course, you can imagine that it gets more complicated with animal products, eggs, milk, meat. But this is your food system, our food system. The majority of us participate in this food system. So why is food suddenly way more expensive? Well, there are two answers to that question that we're about to get to. The first one will make a lot of intuitive sense because we just traced the journey of a tomato. The second one will boil your blood.
Guys, quick interruption here. If you are fascinated by the United States and all these American topics like I am, then maybe consider subscribing to my channel. I am a small channel. I'm trying to grow and I'm trying to learn about the United States and I find it very interesting. And if you do too, then please click that button. But now back to the video.
Answer number one, something happens along the way. Like, let's go back to this map and you see that in this journey, your tomatoes passed through farmers and packagers and cold storage and drivers and customs brokers, international trade treaties, warehouses, wholesalers, grocery stores. If any part of this system breaks or becomes more expensive, or if there's a power outage or a storm or a frost or a drought or gas prices spike, workers go on strike, there's a new tariff, that can make any one of these steps more expensive. And it is you, the final customer, who will pay that price. We call this a supply chain shock or shortage. And it's kind of ironic that the system that makes food more accessible and cheaper is also the same system that makes our prices fragile.
Yeah,
so yeah, that's
true.
Answer number one, supply chain shocks. And over the last 4 years, I mean, you know, there's kind of been a lot. There was obviously COVID, but that was just the beginning of a domino effect. There was a drought in the Mediterranean, so olive oil prices went up.
Climate-related issues have screwed up fresh produce writ large. There are both climate stuff that affects how much we can grow, but also sometimes climate then interacts with like disease outbreaks.
I didn't know that oil shot up that much in the US as well, in the Mediterranean. Like, we can notice in Germany, and it started with the pandemic, that every type of oil got way, way more expensive. The standard sunflower oil that we bought here, that was always like euro, $1 for a liter. Now I think that's like 3 or 4. Maybe, so it like got really, really expensive. I didn't know that the Mediterranean shortage in olive oil also apparently affected the US.
Freeze in Texas wiped out a bunch of citrus.
These farmers are experiencing some of the worst conditions ever because of the drought. The ground is just not fit for grazing, and like many others, the rancher here has had to cull his herd because it's more economical than feeding them.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine messed with a lot of industries.
The war in Ukraine spiked wheat prices there for a little bit,
prices.
and also spiked fertilizer prices. And the issue is Russia controls one type of fertilizer, but not two others. And so it meant farmers had to like retool all of their systems to switch to the other fertilizer. And then there was a run on those two fertilizers. Oh, palm oil got really screwed up there for a while because Indonesia decided to temporarily ban exports because prices were increasing so much. So they wanted to make sure they had enough supply. This was also kind of in the wake of Ukraine. And so vegetable oil prices were up.
A hurricane in Florida messes with orange groves. The Houthi rebels in Yemen are firing rockets at these merchant ships that are the lifeblood of the global economy.
Canada, the largest producer of canola oil, had a big drought. And so that dropped. Meat.
So a lot of natural catastrophes, and if you think about it, it's a little ironic. It's almost like we're abusing our planet and now the planet is changing and these things happen, and then in the end it's a little bit of payback for our environmental abuse, I guess, you know what I'm saying.
Processing during the pandemic, there were massive COVID outbreaks in meat packing. And so they had slowed down a lot of line speeds because there were fewer workers. And so just like less meat was getting slaughtered and packaged.
And then of course there were shortages in random things like packaging and trucking and cold storage and shipping containers.
During COVID, production of aluminum cans was lower because factories were closed. But then trade wars over aluminum has affected cans. And so for a while, soda was being affected and beer were being affected.
Each shock to the system triggers a reverberation through the rest of the system, which makes things more expensive and unpredictable. The price goes up, and eventually the price of your final product, the thing you see on the grocery aisle, has gone up. Okay, so no one's disputing that supply chain shocks are a major reason why prices have gone up. But this isn't actually the full explanation. There's something bigger going on here, and that gets to my second answer to the question of why grocery prices are more expensive. I'll just say it up front here, which is we've all been kind of tricked. And there are people making a lot of money off of us being tricked about prices.
Basically in COVID, I think there was kind of a reckoning of customers were pretty understanding when companies said, hey, you're going through hard times and so are we. Like our costs are going up. There was kind of this reset. The American consumer has gotten so used to having a really cheap thing delivered to their door in like 2 hours, right? Like in Econ 101, they teach you about a supply and a demand curve, right? And as you increase prices, the number of units you sell goes down. And what you're trying to do is like maximize those two things of like, I can sell as many products as I can make for as much as this. And like, that's, you know, the price that you set.
The invisible hint, yeah.
Right. Yes. And so if you increase prices, you expect intuitively to sell a little bit less. Now you can like jigger it enough that like the total is a little bit higher. But what companies realized is they could inch prices up and see no or very little reduction in consumer demand. And so
companies thought, hey, look at this. We can exploit this.
Kept doing it.
This will be clear very soon because there's a lot of examples of this, but the best one that is on my mind is eggs.
The egg price is out of control.
Eggs are insanely expensive right now. Maybe by the time you're watching this, they will have gone down a little bit, but over the last like 3-4 years, egg prices have gone crazy. And what's the explanation that we're all hearing? Yes, the bird flu, culling millions of hens.
Bird flu.
Bird flu.
Bird flu. Already, more than 90 million birds have been killed since the outbreak started.
I mean, if you are an egg producer and suddenly there's an outbreak of bird flu in all of your farms, like that's a huge deal. That'd be like really terrible, right? For your business. You're like, man, our product is being killed by a flu. And wait a minute. US's biggest egg producers' profits triple as prices soar. Wait, triple? Profits? For the biggest egg producer. Oh, and if you look at the biggest egg producer's stock price, you see this. Right around the time when the avian flu is happening, their stock price is going nuts. Time to get out their annual report.
So they're using basically these catastrophes and the good intent of the people, like you said with COVID, hey, we understand you're going through a hard time, company XYZ, so we're willing to go through it with you and pay a little bit more. And then the people from the company see, hey, look at that. Good intent of these people. We can use that to our advantage. He's right, this is gonna bring my blood to a boil.
For Cal-Maine Foods, Inc. They're a privately traded company. They must disclose all of their financials, which means we can get a little more insight as to how they fared during this time when there is a crisis in our egg economy. And all of us are paying like more than double the price for a dozen of eggs. This is 2023. And it looks like its shareholders got paid $250 million in profits. Okay, it's right in the middle of the bird flu crisis. You wouldn't think that they would be profiting that much, but is that a lot? $250 million, maybe that's not that much. Let's graph the dividends, the profits paid out to shareholders. Whoa, okay, well, 2020.
What the fuck, man? What the hell?
2023 was a great year for the largest egg producer in the United States, despite like all of this avian flu. So in 2023, they paid $250 million. The year before, they paid $6 million. So they had a 40 times increase in the profits they paid out to their shareholders, right in the heart of when all of us were going to restaurants and seeing these signs. We're raising prices on eggs because there's a bird flu, so we have to pay more. But the company making the eggs is profiting a lot more money. It's not just revenue. It's not like they're making more money and their costs have increased a bunch, so they are profiting. They are making way more money after all of their costs, and we're all paying more. Oh, and this year, 2025, their profits are up 342% in Q2 of this year. I mean, just to mic drop, like drive this home, let's put these two graphs next to each other. This one is the price for a dozen eggs. It's gone up a ton because of bird flu. And this one is profits for shareholder of Cal-Maine Foods going up at the same time. So these graphs tell a story of a company who was able to raise prices more than what they needed to cover their costs. And they were somehow able to do that. Can we just look at the supply of eggs in the United States?
And I do believe companies do that on every scale. Your little local food corner that said, ooh, my price has gone up too. They're probably right, their prices have gone up, but you pay probably more of a percentage upcharge than what they do for their supply chain. And I'm pretty sure we've seen it so hard over the last couple of years here, and it's getting quite out of hand. Same situation here in Germany, and the people are just good willingly thinking, hey, this is how it is. But I think the voices might get a little bit louder nowadays. It's just really, I don't know. I feel like we need more videos like this to show us actually what's going on and educate people about it. And then I don't know what we're going to do. It's not like people are going to start boycotting and stop buying eggs. But I don't know. Something has to change.
Just real quick. This graph, there's the price. Price goes up here, right? Now let's draw on the number of eggs produced in the United States during this time. Here's the outbreak of the avian flu, early 2023. Now I'm going to draw on the number of eggs produced in the United States. If I were guessing, I hadn't seen this chart before, I would imagine it would look something like this, like eggs, flu happens, production of eggs plummets. When there's less supply, prices have to go up, and that's why prices went up. Now let's draw on the real shape. Again, number of eggs produced in the United States. Boom. Kind of barely dips. Yes, avian flu was a real thing. I'm not like drawing some like conspiracy theory here that like this is not real, but like this crisis was as much about storytelling as it was about supply and demand. We all accepted way higher prices because of these signs, because of all of this news. And in fact, thanks to COVID, we were kind of used to hearing about supply chains and paying higher prices and waiting longer because of something that's out of our control. This is the driver of inflation, right? But what this story tells is that there's a company that, by the way, controls 25% of the market. They're a huge player, the largest player by far in the egg economy, that has the ability to raise prices even when they don't need to increase costs. And that company, by the way, if you chart how many eggs they were making, during the crisis, they were actually making more eggs and just selling them at a way higher price. So of course their profits tripled. Of course their shareholders made off with huge dividends. This is the kind of stuff that happens when one company owns a huge portion of an industry.
And I think it happens everywhere and a lot of scales.
They're able to manipulate the market. That is supposed to be a competitive space where all the firms compete for customers by lowering their prices as much as they possibly can. But our modern food system has become more and more consolidated.
And this is also a reason why in the America and a lot of first world countries, the gap between the rich and the poor widens, right? Because who's benefiting from this? The big corporations. And in these big corporations, who's making the big bang from it? It's the CEOs, the COOs, the managers, the high-end people in there, because their salaries also probably go up. The shareholders, they're all getting paid out. Those are people or other companies that invest into that. So it's basically the rich. The rich are benefiting from this, and everybody on ground level has to pay more for their eggs. And I really believe that it happens on all scales and all levels, and in the US as well as in Europe, Asia, probably everywhere.
4 firms handle 85% of all beef processing in the US. 3 companies control 78% of all pasta. 2 firms own 70% of the canned tuna industry. 1 company dominates seed genetics.
Picture how much power they must have.
Flow through just 4 chains. This level of consolidation means that companies don't compete on prices, they match prices. And when there is a crisis, they're able to take advantage of that to help spread the narrative and signal to the rest of us that prices have gone up because of this crisis, when really they're just padding their bottom line. There's a bunch of lawsuits happening right now because of this. McDonald's is suing meat companies for colluding to keep prices high. Frozen potatoes for your French fries.
Wow, so big corporations are suing other big corporations because they also have a problem with that. I hope some of that will have some kind of a result.
Also very consolidated. Also some like price manipulation allegations there. A big turkey producer is in the middle of a price fixing scandal. They've had to pay out settlements. $32 million here, $4 million there. I mean, this is kind of a cost of doing business when you are a big industrial food producer and you use your power to cash in. So we've been told a story that these crises, COVID and supply chain shocks, are at the root of inflation, of prices going up. But there's now pretty compelling evidence that corporate profits, their ability to take advantage of these crises to raise prices above where they need to be, is a major driver of inflation. Meaning we're paying more money and we're making these companies way richer. Corporate profits are at an all-time high despite some volatility in the economy. Last year, margins reached over 16%, which is the highest on record since 1950. And it's not just in food, it's across all sectors.
The CFO of Hershey in 2023 said on an earnings call to the company shareholders, quote, "Pricing and productivity gains more than offset inflation and higher manufacturing and overhead costs. In non-Wall Street speak, that says we increased our prices
more than they needed to.
What our increased costs were.
Yep.
Like our costs for sugar, cocoa, etc. have gone up, but we have been able to not only pass all.
Yeah, let's say our cost to produce something went up 10%. We increased the price by 15%. So more profit.
All of those costs onto consumers, but then some, increasing our profit margin.
And the disgusting thing is that it all went on the basis of people just being good-hearted, like willing to pay more. You know, like you said in the beginning, we are with you, we get it, companies.
Hershey's wasn't the only company to say this. Virtually, like, the vast majority of S&P 500 companies said this.
Profits are soaring while a family of 4 who's surviving on a thrifty food plan is seeing their costs for food increase by 30% or more over the last few years. More and more turning to government programs. And so now our taxpayer dollars are going to help inflated prices to make shareholders rich. It's not a good setup.
Great.
It's not a good set of incentives.
Capitalism.
It's not a free market. This isn't good. And yet, luckily, there is some hope here. The Department of Justice is already investigating this egg price fixing allegation. Cal-Maine has already been accused of doing this in previous disease outbreaks.
Now, the largest supplier of eggs in the U.S. now under federal investigation related to sky-high prices that consumers saw for several months.
But what
It's
really
not
needs
the
to
first
happen
time.
is a breaking up of these food companies that have so much power in the market. Food isn't like other things. It's not like vacations and cars and things that are discretionary. It is our basic survival. There's also a necessary reckoning with how reliant we are on these far-flung supply chains. COVID really started this, and you're starting to see more and more stuff come regional and local. Mexico is experimenting with the government coming in and putting a price control for a basic basket of food, using their power to negotiate with food corporations to keep prices affordable for the basics.
And so for the equivalent of like $40, you can get enough food to feed your family of like rice, beef, a couple vegetables, a gallon of milk, these basics. And in fact, that price has come down by like 12% over the past year.
Yeah, then the big discussion starts. Like, should the economy be influenced by the government that much? You know, is that still capitalism? Is it freedom of the market? And is this going towards like controlling companies too much? And that's kind of like against what I think the American dream for a lot of people is, and what these companies try to like convey, you know, what they stand for. So I think that's it's a big discussion. But if you see these things happening, it is one of the logical things that governments are thinking about. And I don't know, maybe it works in Mexico. Maybe there are negative long-term effects.
And she did this, it's effectively a price control, but it's voluntary. So in fact, Walmart of Mexico participates in this program. But she got a bunch of farmers and suppliers and retailers to all buy into this program. She negotiated this big deal. And they all offer like a basic basket
is it
of
subsidized
goods
by the
for Mexican
government?
She
That's
just
the
used
question.
kind of the weight of the government to say, hey, I think groceries should be cheaper for Mexicans, and how can we work together to do it?
Haremos un acuerdo para que continúe la estabilidad, que no sube el precio de la canasta básica con los empresarios.
So, there is some movement happening here. The reality is our food system is amazing. It has made food much cheaper than it was. But it has some real weaknesses. Weaknesses that are being exposed in the last few years, and that a lot of people are feeling when they go to the grocery store. And that is where the government steps in to ensure that our food system works for the consumers, the people who need to be able to rely on affordable food, and not for the corporations that provide it.
And that's the question. Is that really what's happening? Is the government stepping in? Is the system working for the consumer, or is the system working for people to make a profit? That's a question. Wow, very interesting video, very annoying video. Like, it does bring my blood to a boil to see that it's basically the corporations that exploited the good intent of the people. I feel like to most of us it was so clear. We saw such increases in Germany where products doubled or even tripled in price, and everybody was thinking, especially with like restaurants, if you go out and the prices just skyrocketed, and they're like, oh yeah, the restaurants, everything got more expensive for them too, you know, the ingredients, whatever they need to produce their food. And now it comes out more and more that they just slapped on top some profit percentages to just increase their profit. And yeah, He showed it too. The S&P 500, the biggest 500 companies on the stock exchange, they are doing as good as ever. It is at an all-time high currently. And after all of these crises we had, and it's just a pity that it all comes down that the end consumer, the people at the bottom level, the poor people like us, that we are the ones like suffering from that. But in the end, I think it's still fairly cheap in the supermarkets compared to other times, is what he's saying. And I also think in Germany it's maybe not quite as bad as it is in the US right now. But let me know what you think about this topic. I think we're all feeling it. We're all in the same boat here. And I would like to know what your standpoint is on this. But yeah, very interesting. I really hope this development doesn't continue. But this is it for this one. Bye-bye.